G'day everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. So the trade period finished up back on Wednesday, and I thought it'd be a good time to go over and give it a recap with each AFL team and giving them a corresponding grade with how they went with this trade period. Don't have to follow the grades religiously really, we have to wait and see on how these new picks and plays impact the new clubs, but in the now we still have the right to judge on seeing how the teams did go. Make sure you like and subscribe if you do go on to enjoy, and let's get into it. So we start off with the Adelaide Crows, and they were one of the more quieter teams in this trade period. They only did the transactions of bringing across 𝐓𝐴𝐼𝐿𝐼 from North Melbourne, as well as their pick 64, and out goes a pick 57 and a 2026 future 4th round pick. So 𝐓𝐴𝐼𝐿𝐼 has shown a bit of AFL experience, debuted earlier this year for North Melbourne, isn't afraid to take some beautiful pack marks, and does join the depths now in that Adelaide key forward stock. Walker's entering his last season, so he potentially might get a go in the near future. I'm just going to give a C- here for the Crows. Honestly, you could give them a D grade because this was the chance potentially to go out and get a Petrarca or a Clayton Oliver. Couldn't land one of those big midfielders, a glaring need, hence their straight sets exit. But when you think about it this way, Dan Curtin and also Sid Draper are some exciting types that do possess on the list that could break out into that quality midfielder. And also, Calamachi they were going to get. The reason I put them in the C- category is because they might end up getting him for nothing in the PSD, and that would be a fine pickup. So C- for the Crows. The Brisbane Lions now, the envy of the competition, and they continue to strengthen up. They bring across via free agency Sam Draper and Oscar Allen. I wouldn't say they're A-grade talents, but they're certainly going to bolster their team. Oscar McInerney just retired. Darcy Fort, very productive in their premiership push again in 2025. However, he is getting on a little bit. So Draper into a winning environment could really boost his stock and become a bit more of a consistent football. That's always been his issue. There is the downside, obviously, with the Achilles injury he's had. Maybe won't be able to have that leap in his step as much. And Oscar Allen arrives from the West Coast Eagles, a good key forward to pair up alongside Logan Morris. Probably takes the pressure off him a little bit, but a massive out with Brandon Starcevic, heart and soul play for their footy club. And Noah Ainsworth was injured this year, to be fair, and they really rate him as a small defender, and he's coming along nicely. I think he probably replaces him. I'll be giving Brisbane an A grade here, probably a bit of a push with an A grade, but think about it, they are the reigning premiers. You don't usually do that many transactions when you've just won a flag, but they continue to strengthen and evolve their already fantastic list. Next up, the Carlton Blues, one of the talking teams of this trade period, because they did do quite a bit with plenty of players ins and outs. Out goes Charlie Curnow, Silvani, De Koning, Durden. In comes Liam Reedy, Campbell Chesser, Ben Ainsworth, Ollie Florent, and Will Hayward. So Reedy and Chesser, a bit of the outsider types. Do they push into the best 22? You think Reedy will compete with Pitnap for the first ruck spot? Campbell Chesser had a few injury problems at West Coast, and I thought his back half of this year wasn't too bad for the Eagles, so maybe they've picked him up at the right time for cheap. Ben Ainsworth, an experienced small forward, comes across from the Suns, and Ollie Florent and Will Hayward comes across from the Blues. I might be a Sydney fan and a bit biased here, but these are some solid plays. Florent fell out of Dean Cox's favour and played a bit of VFL football this year after playing, I think, over 120 games consecutively, but he's a great ball user, smooth mover, naturally gifted player. Maybe plays on a wing. That's been the issue for Carlton on the outside, and they need some good ball users. He's definitely one. He needs to get obviously back to his best because that was the issue for him in 2025. And Will Hayward, really reliable goal kicker. His pressure off the ball, he's fantastic. Blues fans really going to love this player. He isn't a superstar, but he is a good, honest, solid footballer. And Curnow is the big out. And when we look at what they got in return, Will Hayward and 3 first-round picks, in the end, it might not be a superstar player they do acquire, but what they do get in return alongside Hayward is some really good draft capital to now go and attack and find and build this depth past their top line, as that has been the underlying issue for Carlton for many years now. So the Blues have lost a bit of their spine in some key plays, but in return, they have now a chance to do a bit of a mini rebuild with this list. Graham Wright obviously appointed one of the head figures at the Blues not long ago. He doesn't muck about, was very successful at Collingwood. So I'm going to give the Blues a real solid B grade here. They need to improve next year. The Blues might be some hiccups with some personnel changes. It's going to be a very different team in comparison to this year, but there's plenty of upside with the players they have lost with what they have brought in for the Blues. Move across now to Collingwood, a sort of quiet trade period from from the Pies, not too notorious with that. They usually a team that likes to trade quite a bit, but only bringing across one player, Jack Buller from the Sydney Swans. Didn't play much football up until this season with Marty and McDonald out for the rest of the year. And as soon as he came in, Jack Buller really impressed. He's competitive, he's great in the air. He's a key forward I think Craig McRae really like. He is a competitive beast, like his second efforts, and they've picked him up for absolute peanuts. And if you look back at, I think, 2019, they picked up Darcy Cameron, turns into an AFL quality ruckman. Good Jack Buller, be a revelation for Collingwood, outdoes 𝐼𝐴 𝐼𝐴. So a younger upgrade potentially for the Pies, because yeah, Jesus, back half the year, 𝐼𝐴 was no good, and a couple of pick swaps here. So going to give Collingwood a C- grade. Some people might put them in the D grade, but Buller, I do have a feeling could be a really shrewd pickup for the Pies. Now across to Essendon, in regards with what they did with ins and outs, very quiet, but still one of the more talked about teams of the trade period, with all the dramas relating to 𝐓𝐴𝐶 𝐼𝐴. But in regards to their transactions, just bringing across Braden Fiorini from the Gold Coast Suns. Experienced son, adds to the depths a bit on their outside game, can run through the midfield a little bit, left footer, and out does go Sam Draper, and a first round pick they will get for that via compensation. But as we said before, all the talk was about 𝐓𝐴𝐶 𝐼𝐴. Would he stay? Would he go? And the list management and their footy figures were pretty adamant that they did want to keep 𝐓𝐴𝐶 𝐼𝐴 at the club. After a few offers from the Hawks, they didn't budge the Bombers, and in a way, good on them. They are in a rebuild phase. Essendon, yes, think about what they could have gotten in return for Marriott going out, but he's your club captain. He's your most important player. They are important figures as a part of the rebuild. But it's up to now the staff and the coaches at the footy club to really get in the right headspace and attack this next season for Essendon. It's a highly debated topic. I lean towards more of the side of good on Essendon for retaining one of their most important players. So it's still a D grade for them, given they did not really do much, but I'll give them a plus for keeping 𝐓𝐴𝐶 𝐼𝐴. Moving on now to the Fremantle Dockers. They brought across Jug McVie from the Melbourne Demons as well as some pick swaps. So they were part of that three-way deal alongside Brisbane and West Coast. Basically, they got out pick 12 and pick 23, and they were able to acquire Jug McVie and pick 19. Some good business there. McVie's first few seasons for Melbourne were really promising, shaping up into a hard-to-beat one-on-one defender, and this year, probably one of his worst seasons to date. Wasn't able to progress his game, but now to a fresh environment back home at Fremantle could do the trick. Look at players like Bailey Banfield, Carl Warner. There's a few players that are at risk in that back six, and McVie does slot in nicely, potentially as a rebounding partner maybe. I did hear he did want to play a bit more of a rebounding role heading into his next season, not necessarily as a lockdown role, so it could be a good pair for someone like Jordan Clark, gives him a bit of support. And for their player outs, Will Brodie and Liam Reedy do depart their club, players that just quite simply couldn't break into the 22, but hey, Streets won't forget Will Brodie's first season at the Dockers. He was an impactful one. I'll give the Dockers a B- grade here. They had a very busy trade period last year, and it's hard to be up there in terms of activity with trade periods every single year, but it's a shrewd pickup they've done to pick up Jug McVie, and could impact nicely for the Dockers in that back six. Next team up now, the Cats. They only had the one player acquisition coming in of James Worpel as a free agent, and out does go Patrick Reshko. He was a player apparently that was delisted, but the Tigers were still willing to pay pick 99 for him. I think we're all searching on Google to see who on earth this player was. But Worpel cross from Hawthorn is certainly quite a bit of a talking point here, adds into that midfield mix. Like many Hawthorn supporters would probably agree, he had a disappointing year. His disposal and his craft was really out of whack. So, hey, the Cats know how to bring in players and make them the best footballers they can be. Look at Bailey Smith and even Jack Martin. Could he impact into that midfield mix on the inside alongside Tom Atkins and, show some of his best from years ago? I'll give the Cats a C grade here. They were rumoured to a handful of players like Charlie Kerner and Roel Marshall, but they just weren't able to bring sufficient draft capital for those opposing teams to accept. But hey, Worpel, I think could definitely impact for the Cats, so I'll give them a C grade here, given they picked them up for nothing. Next up, the Gold Coast Suns. Very, very busy team in this trade period. Look at this graphic. Had to fill up the board a wee bit here. Christian Petrarca, 𝐎𝐿𝐴, and out does go a plethora of players, but they have gotten a star player of Christian Petrarca. Paid up quite a bit, 2 first rounders, and I think a future first as well, and they got a bit of draft capital back, and that's the most important thing with Gold Coast. Yes, they've acquired some really good players with Petrarca and 𝐎𝐿𝐴, but they do possess the draft capital to match those academy bids with this upcoming draft, should a few of them get bid on, which you'd think definitely will happen. I'd say Damien Hardwick's a massive factor to Petrarca's arrival ever since he's arrived. Look between the list now and what it was when Hardwick first arrived, a lot has changed. Breakout season for Gold Coast, won their first final, and adding Petrarca into that already star quality midfield mix is really going to bolster them, you'd think. Yes, didn't have the lofty heights of seasons he's had in the past, but I still personally thought he did extremely well to get back to at least somewhat of his impactful shell of himself. He was ranked elite this year in score involvements. Still does display plenty of his power. A real good pick up there for Gold Coast. And 𝐎𝐴𝐺𝐝, across from nothing, just picked 74, and there are a few technicalities on his contract. It's just a one-year deal, and he can be sacked right away if he does something wrong, and there is a trigger clause. If he does well, he will get an extension. So, going to be giving Gold Coast an A grade here. They've smashed it. They've picked up a star in Christian Petrarca, a speculative type in 𝐎𝐴𝐺𝐝, but they've done well to have the picks acquired, locked and loaded, ready to match those bids for their academy players in this upcoming draft. So an A grade for the Suns. Across now to the GWS Giants, and they have done really well to acquire Clayton Oliver across from the Melbourne Demons. This could be a beauty of a pickup for the Giants. Could he get in the right headspace? He's now out of that Melbourne Vic bubble and really focus back onto his game, because he's been a great inside midfield bull back in his days. Needs to get back up there, and this will really boost the stocks for that Giants inside midfield group. Will give a bit of assistance for Tom Green on the inside, no doubt. Stephen Coniglio is another one that's slowing down, so for a future third round pick, if he gets in the right headspace and smashes next year, he could be one of the recruits of the season. They did also do a pick swap with the Western Bulldogs, with 14 and 37 going out and pick 12 in, and Jacob Ware leaving via free agency to Port Adelaide. So I'll be giving the Giants a B grade here. Really like the acquisition of Clayton Oliver. Boosts that Giants midfield every day of the week, and in a new environment, could he get back to his best. Next team up now, we do have the Hawks, and they were another side that was talked up quite a bit, but in the end, they don't bring in a single player. Credit to Hawthorn, though, the last 5 years, they have done really well on the trade table front of things, building their list each and every season. But this is the year they weren't able to acquire a player. But that's not saying they sat on their hands. They really wanted to attack this trade period and bring in a big player. Obviously, Zach Merritt was their guy, but just couldn't get a deal done in the end. They were also linked to a few players early this season with Oscar Allen and also Harley Reid, but couldn't bring anyone in this trade period. A few pick swaps they did do, though. And a few departures here for Hawthorn. James 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿 does come out, as we said in the Geelong segment. His touch and his skill was really out of whack, so one, I do think that can benefit with him out. 𝐓𝐴𝐺𝐝 𝐻𝐿 couldn't get consistent game time at the Hawks, could he get at the Ds. And Jai Sarong's an interesting one. Plenty of Hawthorn supporters have been talking up this kid. 2 years in a row, he's been their VFL best and fairest, versatile defender, and this is sort of the scenario you get, to be honest, when you bring across Josh Battle and Tom Barrass. You get a player that maybe could benefit and another club does go out. In the end, I'm going to give Hawthorn a D grade here. This is our opportunity to evolve their list, bring in a star. Couldn't get the Merritt deal over the line, and a few players that were linked to, they couldn't bring anyone across in the end. So, a bit of an underwhelming trade period for this Hawthorn team, but overall still very talented side. But a D grade it is. Now for the Melbourne Demons, they were very busy in this trade period. You'd think Stephen King would have played a part in this trade period. He did, with especially the likes of Clayton Oliver saying at his exit meeting, mate, if you're not really going to improve your versatility, you're not really going to be part of this side, you need to get better. Out he does go. They bring in 𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐻𝐿, Jack Steele. I heard their list manager talk about Jack Steele. It's an interesting one. They see Steele as a player that can play on the wing and half forward, so maybe his versatility is why they wanted Steele and wanted to punt Oliver for so cheap for a future third rounder, and that's what they also acquired Steele for, as a future third. Still think he has some good footy left in the tank, Jack Steele. Brodie 𝐼𝐻𝐿, their key forwards has been an issue, the Demons, the last 2 years or so, I'd say now. Bailey Fritsch, and especially those younger types of Jefferson and Van Rooyen, have been in and out of the side, so 𝐼𝐻𝐿 not only could impact with the little football he's got left, but can definitely be a mentor for those young key forwards. And Max Heath is also a young key forward that has come across from the Saints, impressed very nicely on his debut game. I remember that was against the Swans, shows a bit of something overhead, and with Max King coming back in for the Saints, it was probably hard to see Heath get a consistent crack at that best 22 for St Kilda, so maybe gets his opportunity now alongside a few other younger key forwards at Demonland. And out does go Charlie Spargo, Jake McVee, and the main two players of Petrarca and Oliver. It's just crazy. Who'd have thunk it 3 years ago that their two key players in their midfielder. Petrarca and all that would be up, but that's just how the way goes. I'm going to be given a B- grade here for Melbourne. These trades for next year, let's say, might not impact them to play finals football necessarily, but Stephen King has come in and obviously wanted to play a key part in reshaping this list. They might have some growing pains next year, as I do say, but this could be an area where they head in the right direction and bringing in players that really could suit his style and his system. So a B- grade here for the Ds. Now for North Melbourne, a fairly quiet team in this trade period. Just bring across the one play of Charlie Spargo. He's an interesting one from the Demons. His first few seasons I thought were quite promising, but the last 18 months I'd say he's fallen out of favour of best 22 football over there. And when you look at North Melbourne's small forwards past Paul Curtis, it is a fairly weak one with players like Zach Fisher and Jacob Castandi, so Spargo could he impact in a new environment. And out does go 𝐼𝐴 looked like a cult figure from what he did show his first couple of games. Impressive overhead with a few nice looking leaps. But they do have an abundance of young key position talent, maybe from his point of view, getting out of North Melbourne. Watch the go. Trent Barthels also another one that did push out 𝐼𝐴 late in the season, and he was impressive. In regards to their trade period though, the Kangas will be given them a D grade here. They need to get better. They need to start picking up wins. They have a very talented young core. They did acquire some experienced players in last year's trade period, to be fair, but they always could do with some experience acquisition, so maybe did they miss a trick here to improve their list in this trade period. So a quiet one from them, a D grade here. For now, at least one that doesn't really make you jump out of your chair. Next team up, Port Adelaide. For their player-ins, they brought across via free agency Jacob Ware from the GWS Giants, Corey Durden from the Blues, and Will Brodie for Fremantle, and also a 2026 future second round pick from the Blues. So I think it was a three-way deal they did do alongside Gold Coast, I'm pretty sure, to get Corey Durden. Out does go picks 29, 57 and 103. So Jacob Ware, an outside type of winger, not a bad left foot on him. He only played 10 odd games for the Giants this year. And hey, with the wing stocks for Port Adelaide, Travis Boak's now retired. You'd think 𝐴𝐴 gets one, and potentially Jacob Ware could fight alongside a Christian Moraes or a Manny Liddy for another wing spot, and in a new environment could get a bit more consistent game time. Corey Durden's an interesting one. He's always shown some flashes here and there, but hasn't been able to piece together a real productive skill set. So maybe at Port Adelaide, it's another team with a fairly weak forward line, and Willie Rioli now retiring. He could fill in a void, potentially Corey Durden. And Will Brodie, on paper, Port Adelaide's midfield is still very good, so it's hard to see him cracking in that best 22, but at least adds to a bit of depth. I'll give the pair a C- grade here. It's going to be intriguing to see how they go next year. The depth past their top liners is very weak, so they've done alright to acquire a few AFL experienced players to help the younger types. But like a few other teams, no star acquisitions I'd say here, so a C- grade for the pair. Next team up, we do have the Richmond Tigers. In regards to them for the trade period, they're never really going to be a team that will attack and try and acquire via trade, because when you look at their list, they are wanting to invest in this draft, no doubt, once again this year with the draft end as well, picks 3 and 4. In regards to the ins and outs, Patrick Reshko does come in. A hard-running utility, I've read. I think we all Googled his name when we're like, who on earth is this guy? Apparently he was delisted by the Cats, but they did. We're happy to pick up, pick 99. And Tyler Young might be a bit of a loss for them. I always thought he was an underrated player. A few nice defensive acts here and there. But when we think about it, they still have Ben Miller, and Josh Gipkus has just recently recovered off an ACL. You'd think Bolter plays more of a solidified defensive role for them next year with him gone. And even Campbell Gray showed a few nice aerial moments in the few games he did play. So they still have a bit to work with key defenders. So one in the end that probably doesn't hurt them too much. I'll just give the Tigers a C- grade here. Thought they got a good enough return for a player like Tyler Young. And I'm intrigued to see if this young Rechko gets a crack. Instead of getting delisted, he comes in for pick 99. Could he get a bit of game time for the Tigers? So a C- grade here. A team that's more invested in the draft rather than the trade period, given where the list is at. Next team up, we have the Saints. Another side had to fill up the graphic quite a bit with the activity they did in this trade period. One of the winning teams of this trade period, I definitely say. They struck big with DeConing and Jack Silvani via free agency. Sam Flanders for pick 7, adding into their midfield, and also flying Liam Ryan across from the West Coast Eagles. Out does go their skipper of Jack Steele. There was a world that they definitely could have kept them in the team, but they were happy to let Jack Steele go. Obviously, their list management sees a world where they can have a successful midfield without him, and he has fallen off his elite best progressively the last few seasons. And Max Heath was the other player that did depart the club. When we think about it though, Max King's going to come back in this year, so from his point of view, it's hard to see him get consistent best 22 football, so might have a bit more of a chance across at the Demons, and out does go pick 7 and a future second to acquire the players they did bring in. Now, they have been one of the most talked about teams in this trade period. Yes, they haven't brought in an A-grade player, but I'm still going to give them an A grade because when you look at the Saints, the last few years they've invested really nicely in the draft, and now this has been their off-season to go out and acquire some solid players from other clubs that have some AFL experience. That's really going to benefit their list. De Koning and Flanders are two types that aren't A-graders, but could become A-graders in a new environment and still have some untapped potential given their ages. Flanders, real hard worker, can find the football, definitely going to impact that midfield. And De Koning, some of his follow-up work is absolute A-grade when he's up and about. 𝐼𝐴 as well, I thought he was fantastic, to be honest, for the Blues. You don't hear much about his impact given the Blues really struggled this year, but intercept-wise, he was really impressed to watch. So with his aerial ability, that was an area the Saints really struggled in the air in their back 50. That's really going to help the likes of 𝐼𝐴 𝐼𝐿𝐴 in that back 6. So each their own, but that's why I've given the Saints an A grade here. This could be potentially in a few years' time a real defining trade period should they succeed. Next team up, the Sydney Swans. Very busy trade period they have had. Dean Cox, second season, really want to shape the list his way, and with obviously himself in discussions with the list management. If 𝐼𝐵𝐞𝐞 is available, go and get him, and by means pay and sell the farm to acquire him. They gave up quite a bit for Charlie Curnow. He's the talking point, or one of the biggest talking points of this trade period. But when we think about it this way, if Sydney could pick any player they'd like, obviously Sam Darcy would be up there, but a star key forward like Charlie Curnow wouldn't be far behind. Yes, there is a downside to him with his knee problems and questions of can he get back to his best, but with him in a new environment, he did say in his press conference it felt like it was time for him to have a new chapter. I could definitely see him get back to his best. Sydney really could benefit with a star key forward and just a player in general that can actually mark the ball forward of centre. They really struggled with that this season, the Swans, alongside some personnel problems. And they also brought across some two outsider types of Malcolm Roses and 𝐼𝐴 𝐻𝐿. But when we talk about building lists, it's trying to identify good-looking talent that's probably on the outside of other teams, and that's what 𝐻𝐿 and Roses fit the mould in. Roses fell out of favour with that small forward group, and 𝐻𝐿 just couldn't break into that best 22, especially when you look at the acquisitions of Josh Battle and Barris for the Hawks this season. He was a two-time best and fairest for their VFL side, 𝐼𝐴 𝐻𝐿, and the Swans could really benefit off a great Rampy replacement. Could he be the type, 𝐼𝐴 𝐻𝐿? And past Tom Papley, their small forward group, this one's really fall off. So Roses has shown a bit of AFL experience in the past. Could he impact as well? And plenty of outs for the Swans, not just players, but draft capital. 2 first-round picks, that's the future 2026 and 2027, alongside pick 11 this year. But at least for the Curnow deal, they've gotten some picks back to help match a few bids in this draft for a couple of academy players. But Florent fell out of favour out of this Sydney team. There was a world I still definitely could have seen Florent impact for the Swans, but he's a great, gifted player and could really go well at a new environment and a team that could really use his foot skills like a Carlton. And Will Hayward, this is a bit of a loss, and it hurts a lot of Sydney supporters seeing him go because he was a heart and soul player. But when we think about it this way, the Swans have missed a couple of grand finals, and perhaps some ruthless list changes was needed, and potentially they just needed to ruffle the feathers a bit. Could they win the premiership with players like Hayward and Florent? With Curnow coming in, it does make sense. Buller does want to go out. They tried hard to retain him, but he sees himself at another club with better opportunity. I'll give Sydney a B+ grade here. They've given up quite a bit for Charlie Curnow, and they have lost some handy depth players and important players too, especially with Will Hayward. But this feels like a bit of a make or break trade period for the Swans. Could Curnow impact and help them be one of their important players to push potentially for another flag tilt? Could Roses and 𝐻𝐿 come through? It's overall a real productive trade period for the Swans. I'll give them a B+. Nearing towards the end now, the Western Bulldogs have got up next. Connor Broderick does come in. A versatile type across from the Gold Coast Suns. He's played a bit in defence and finished off last season, or 2025 I should say now, as a pressure forward. So one that could add into the depths there. They gave up pick 37 for him. And Ugo Hagen does leave the club. So there we go. It was pretty much guaranteed from what journalists were saying throughout the season that he is not going to be playing another game for the Western Bulldogs. And pick 74, geez, how the tables can turn and how things can change. He was a number 1 draft pick and out for pick 74. So I'm going to give the Dogs a D grade here. They still possess a very good quality list, and last year's trade period, to be fair, was a productive one from them, but was this their chance to go out and get a �𝐼𝐷𝐿 or a Stephen May to really help Rory Lobb? When we look at their list, though, they do possess some promising younger key position players like Jade Buslinger and also O'Donnell, who played a handful of games for them this year. So personally, that's a question I still ask regarding the Dogs trade period, so I'll give them a D grade here. And the final team of the trade period, we have the West Coast Eagles. They got to work in this trade period. Brandon 𝐼𝐸𝐻 across from the Brisbane Lions pairs up really nicely with a player like Ruben Jimri, helps solidify the defence, a two-time premiership player and a real diligent one. He's one that could really impact nicely for this Eagles side. And Tyler Young to add to the depths of their key position stocks could be a shrewd pickup. As I said in the Richmond segment, always came across as a bit of an underrated player. So most likely you'd say plays best 22 football, and with Jeremy McGovern retired, could pair up with a player like Harry Edwards. And a few pick swaps here, so they did well to get rid of pick 16 and 22 and still acquire 𝐼𝐸𝐻, but also get back pick 12. So that was some nice business there for the Eagles. Out does go Oscar Allen, though, their club captain, and Liam Ryan. And Campbell Chesser, just as he was finally recovering from all his injuries, played some decent football in the back half of the year. He now does go out. Regarding their grade, I'll give the Eagles a B here. They still have picks 1, 2, and 13 in this draft, so they're not only going to attack this draft, but they've done well to bring in some solid AFL footballers from other clubs, or 𝐼𝐸𝐻 and Young, to really help solidify their back six. So B grade for West Coast. So everyone, there is the trade recap done and dusted for each and every team. Like I said at the start of the video, you don't have to follow these grades. It's just a bit of a measure to grade on how teams went for the now, but who knows in a year's time or 2 years' time how these new picks and players can impact for the new clubs. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did go on to enjoy today's video, lads. Pretty cruisy in regards to the off-season content, but still want to pump out some videos over the next couple of months, so do stay tuned. And that's it from me, everybody. Take care until next time. I'll talk to you later. See you later, fellas.